Hello, I'm Jennifer Monthy, Chairperson of the New York State Special Education Task Force. The mission of the New York Special Education Task Force is to improve opportunities and outcomes for students with disabilities throughout the state. The task force accomplishes this through bringing all special education stakeholders together, parents, school personnel, service providers, students, and others, to understand and discuss the current issues impacting special education. Because of this unique collaboration, communication is improved and conflict is reduced. To further this effort, the task force members spearheaded this video on effective communication strategies between parents and schools. 13 seasoned parents, advocates, and school professionals were asked a series of questions focused on effective communication at CSE meetings and throughout the school year. It is the task force hope that this video will lead to further discussion among school personnel, parents, and other special education stakeholders to promote communication and collaboration in improving the outcomes of students with disabilities.
Actions that a school can take prior to CSE is not thinking of this annual review, the CSE meeting, as a one-shot meeting, but hopefully good communication involves consistent, clear communication, open lines between the parent and the school all year long.
You're the person who's spending 6 to 8 hours with their child every day, so it's nice for them to have an opportunity to just talk to you. You know, open houses usually aren't right away. If there's a CSE meeting, it's usually not the first week of school. So I encourage people to make some phone calls to get to know each other.
You know, I think it's very important that our staff maintain open lines of communication with parents. If a parent contacts you with a concern about their child, that's taken a lot for that parent to call you, and it's important enough that they've reached out to you. So I would expect that you respond in a timely manner.
Way before any CSE meeting, hopefully there's communication between providers and parents all along.
We're flexible in terms of communication. Parents are busy, so we have people or teachers that will reach out by way of text, email, phone call, so just being flexible in the different modes of communications to be parent-friendly.
If you have continued communication through the school year, it definitely makes going into a CSE meeting better.
I know a lot of parents can feel intimidated in CSE meetings.
You're walking into a room by yourself with possibly anywhere from 5 to 6 other people, if not more, by yourself.
So right away you're thinking, what were they talking about? Were they talking about me? Were they talking about my child? Was it good? Was it bad? Then you sit in the seat that's left.
The CSE, they have their agenda and you don't know what it is. And you're not sure what's going to come at you in that room. So it's scary. It's a lot of emotions.
The parent is sitting out in the hallway, the door is closed. You assume the door is closed because they're talking about you or your child, and it's very disarming. We would send the person that the parent was the most comfortable with out to greet the parent and walk the parent in. Sometimes we would even stand up. There's nothing worse than walking into the Last Supper scene. Everybody is seated and you have an assigned seat. So it's kind of reflective of what kind of culture you want to communicate.
Parents, we need to remember that it would help us to put ourselves in the shoes of that parent. They're coming from a place of love for the child, and if they're angry or concerned, that's probably based out of fear, and we need to reduce that.
Ways that schools can support families before a meeting and make to be able to have a more productive and collaborative meeting is informing the families better of what the meeting is coming up on, where it's going to be discussed, giving them resources and how to prepare for the meeting, whether it's having a conversation, if it's an annual review meeting, what are we looking at in an annual review? If it's a triannual meeting, what has to be done before that meeting? So families get a better understanding and come more prepared for that.
Parents have been surprised at meetings at times, and they get dumbfounded into inaction except to release their emotions. That's not helpful for anybody.
You can reach out to parents and talk to them about what's going to happen at the meeting.
Let them know what the meeting's about, what the intent of the meeting is, and to get to know each other.
Make that phone call to talk about, here's what the meeting will look like, here's who will be attending, and here's what their roles are.
Another thing that school districts can do is they can provide all the evaluations and reports prior to the CSE meeting.
When dealing with bilingual families, things that school can do to promote good meetings is prior to the meeting. One, if making sure that the letters are translated in their home language, and making sure that the parents is understanding, pointing that they're entitled to an interpreter at their meeting.
I like to reach out to parents and ask if they've received that information.
So that the parent comes into the meeting as prepared as the school personnel.
Make sure the data we send home is quality. When we report on IEPs, it's really information that parents can understand and it's meaningful.
And beyond just sending them the report, to have the actual evaluators reaching out to the parent before the meeting and going over the results, asking if they have any questions.
Try to have the draft IEP ready to go 2 weeks prior to the meeting and sending it home, giving the parents a chance to actually review, maybe reflect, ask questions. Our CSE chair is sharing and reporting that she's finding that many parents are actually reading it in advance.
This gives the parents a chance to review the documentation, to research it, to understand it, and come in as an equal member.
And that level of communication actually serves both sides, because when you get to the meeting, if the parent is upset about something, you know about it, because they've already told the evaluators, I disagree with that, or I'm unhappy with that, or wow, I was shocked by that result, or I don't understand that result. What does it mean? Can you put it in context for me? I think those kinds of things can really help a CSE meeting get off on the right foot.
Parents need to know that the Committee of Special Education includes them. Perhaps they're the first and most important person in that team.
You want to try to make a parent feel that they are an equal part of this process.
You know, I always would say to staff and to remind myself, parent is an equal member by law.
Not only by law are they defined as part of the committee, but most district personnel will tell you that the committee is incomplete without them. They love it when parents are there. Some districts, they can't always get all the parents to come in. They can't even contact them and have them show up. So they really do want parents to be there because they know that child's success is based on that.
Given the opportunity, I like to encourage parents and just reassure them that they are their child's #1 advocate, they're their child's first teacher. I also encourage parents to feel free to share in the beginning of the year what their hopes are in terms of goals. From year to year, you may have different providers, and the last team may know your child very well. So it's good for parents to be proactive all throughout the year.
Get involved in the process. They must take some responsibility for whether their child is making progress or not, monitoring that also. No parent should leave it up to anybody else alone to make those decisions. The parent needs to be a part of that.
There's a difference between parent involvement and parent engagement, and I think to help with communication and help with relationships, it's supposed to be a team collaborative effort, then parents need to be part of that process with the schools right from the start.
Remember to be open and honest with the staff that they're talking with. Our intent is to help their child.
In my experience, I think parents who are attempting to promote good, communication when they come in for a meeting certainly reach out to school ahead of time.
Parents should also be part of the team and constantly be in conversation, not just expect to have things told to them or anything, but they sharing also.
I think if they have a concern before the meeting, to let the chair know so that the chair can make sure that concern is addressed at the table.
talk about what are the concerns. What is it that you feel like is keeping your child from functioning appropriately in school?
To communicate well in meetings, one thing I tell parents is don't keep your agenda hidden from the school. That doesn't help. Whatever your goal or agenda is, whatever you want to discuss, let them know at least a couple days before the meeting.
Maintaining documentation is very important throughout the year. Work samples from your child, good or bad, progress reports, report cards, and then preparing for your CSE meeting, which to me is the most important thing an advocate or a parent can do. You need to really look at all the documentation, review it, analyze it, understand it, ask for help, look on Google if you need to. List your questions that you have. You want to stay on focus. And remember, in the end, that the school district is there to provide an appropriate education for your child. To me, appropriate is a very subjective term, and the school district might have a different idea as to what's appropriate versus what the parent thinks is appropriate. So you need to go in there, feel confident in being able to advocate.
Always, always, always recommend preparation. I recommend parents write an outline. I mean, I'll help them do this, or they can do it on their own, but write an outline of what their expectations are for the meeting.
Tools that we at the Parent Center usually facilitate to families is a student-parent worksheet that goes in the order of the IEP, and we usually suggest to parents to answer the questions, how their child is doing in different areas, just the same way how it's being discussed at the meeting.
Because sometimes you will get in there and get nervous, and so having a list to refer back to can be helpful for yourself.
Meeting preparation is the most important thing. You must be prepared to discuss those reports. And if you need the school to help you, you can ask to go in and speak to them about those evaluations prior. But go with your list because you want to make sure you focus on the issues at hand and reduce the emotions involved.
No one should ever walk into a meeting, certainly a formal CSE meeting, not knowing what's going to happen. We need to talk beforehand. We need to exchange drafts. We need to have some communication. We need to bounce ideas off each other, talk about strategies, and refine those in a meeting, but never walk into a meeting cold.
I also think if you're bringing anybody else with you, it's nice to give the chair an update. We tell you who we're bringing, and I think anybody should bring everybody they want to bring, but it's just nice to let the chair know who else to expect at the table.
Provide any private evaluations that they obtain to the school district days prior to the CSE meeting.
Don't be afraid to share information. You know, it's really important for us sometimes to know what's going on at home too. If you're having difficulty at home, don't be afraid to ask us for help or for our suggestions, because we want the child to be successful across all of their environments.
I've always approached any meeting involving my daughter as an opportunity for me to get more information and work with the school district.
I would always try to encourage parents, when in doubt, pick up the phone and call.
There's a lot of acronym, there's a lot of legalese language that's used. For parents to call ahead of time and say, you know, I've just received this ream of paperwork in the mail from you, which they do, and can you explain it to me?
And every time I've asked for information or asked for a pre-meeting, asked for a dialogue with the teachers or the administrator in advance, the answer's always been yes.
Actions or statements by staff that tend to undermine the communication at CSE meetings include things like not being responsive to parent phone calls or emails in a timely manner.
Indicating to parents that we're too busy or we have too many kids. Parents don't want to hear about that, you know, and they need to know that we care about their kid just as much as every other kid.
I think that there are some communication strategies, if they're used by anybody, will undermine a meeting. And I think if people come into a meeting and they're defensive, or they're feeling that something has occurred that they're not aware of, or if people are feeling that they're being surprised by information that's presented, people can become really defensive. And I think sometimes that really creates an atmosphere at a meeting that's not conducive to working as a team. And bottom line, everybody is gathered at that table because of a child. And sometimes we all have to be reminded of that.
One mistake that schools make that don't help communication at all is when they give an IEP to the parent at the meeting, like as we're starting, or if they give the latest evaluations or requested a copy of an old evaluation, whatever it is, at the meeting. That doesn't help because at that meeting, that is useless to the parent. Because some of them start to read it, but then they're not at the meeting. They can't be listening or talking or communicating. So then the other option is don't read it, but then it doesn't help you at the meeting because you're not going to read it till after you leave. So I get that districts are busy and they have a lot to do. I understand that. But that's the thing that would help communication so much and help the meeting go better if they would get that information out regularly, early.
What I find as a parent when I deal with teachers and also with administrators is that they tend to use a lot of jargon, a lot of educational jargon, and sometimes some legal jargon.
I think just keeping in mind that most parents are not in the education field. We have a lot of buzzwords and acronyms, just using language that any parent can understand regardless of their level of education.
I think there are some things that staff may do and say and not realize the impact that has on communication with parents. One of which being relying on information from other staff members who maybe don't know the student well, but are making assumptions instead of forming their own judgment based on the knowledge they have with children and with families.
I think the one consistent thing that I see across the board where a school district will undermine positive communication with a family is during a CSE meeting when they're discussing the behaviors of a student, and the staff members or administration at the meeting will immediately imply that it's something to do with the family dynamics or lack of follow through on the parent's part. Parents need to feel supported during this time, and when they are blamed for what is going on without any support from the school district, they immediately feel isolated and they lose complete trust in the process.
Things that schools do that undermine communication is sometimes lumping kids together without looking at individual needs. So like for instance saying all kids would like extended time. I have 25 other kids in the class, they would all love extended time. And so that's not looking at the individual needs. Also saying, all kids need to be independent when some kids need supports in order to get to that independence. So it's just lumping everybody together.
As a special ed administrator, I encourage our providers to never say that we don't do something, but try to think through in terms of what does the student need and how can we best match what the student needs within our system.
I think the biggest mistake that schools make when they're talking to parents are sometimes focusing almost immediately and too much on what they have or what the programs are that they have that are available. This is what we have. Hope you like it, and we've pretty much already made the decision, and I hope you like the decision that we've made. And that, no parent is going to walk in wanting to feel like they had no input into what the decision about their child was.
As an Italian, one of the most obvious things to me that will hinder communication is leading the conversation with your feelings.
Both the school and the parent have equal legitimate concern about what's best for the child. So in my counseling days, I'm a former school psychologist, using those I statements, I feel, I believe, kind of deflects it from being personal and more focused on what the actual concern or issue is.
Be open-minded, willing to come up with, suggestions, solutions, and keep your emotions in check. You can't let the emotions get out of hand because that just hinders communication from the start.
I don't want a parent going in there just with their passion for their child, because that's not going to help them communicate the points that you need to communicate to get whatever services and accommodations that child needs.
There's one thing I see that parents do that can undermine communication immediately when they go into a CSE or CPSE meeting. They tend to go in with immediate distrust of the school district, and they fail to listen to what the school district is saying.
You need trust on both sides, and so going in not trusting just off the start, and trying to figure out what they're going to say before they even get there.
I think a lot of times parents sometimes get defensive.
And so you're angry walking in, you're kind of ready for a fight.
And it's a protective way that they express the insecurity they might be feeling.
For example, I had a meeting with a family who had come to me at the last minute. I didn't know them very well, and I agreed to go to a meeting with them. I knew that they had some difficulty with their district. I did not realize the extent of the difficulty they had. So we went into the meeting prepared, and about 5 minutes into it, the parents started yelling at the school district staff and making demands that were, at the moment, unreasonable. We hadn't had a full discussion. In turn, the administration and the staff began to shut down. They also became a little angry at the parent, and I could not diffuse the situation in that meeting. So I asked the mother to excuse ourselves if she would mind coming outside, and I tried to calm the mother down. But at that point, we had lost all control. And so I went back in and I asked if we could possibly postpone the meeting, that I don't think we were going to make any headway. The school district agreed. I then took the parent, I met with her again, and I said, I want you to list your concerns, but I also want you to tell me, what is the district saying, or how are they responding that is making you so upset? What are they doing? So she gave me her list. And then I had a release to speak to the school, so I asked some of the district staff, what are your concerns, and what is mom doing that is upsetting you so much and causing this breakdown? Well, when I looked at both the answers, it was almost for the same reason, the lack of trust and the feeling of power. So I ended up going back to the mom and explaining what the district felt and trying to put her in their place. And then I went back to the district and tried to put them in the parents' place. And I said, if we can come together and try to come in with trust and sit together and discuss this and get through at least the first half hour, I think we can do this. And they both agreed. We did. We ended up having a great meeting. I still go to meetings with the mom, but it's very different now. We go in and I'm there just for more peer support, emotional support, and mom is a great advocate, and the communication, there's no breakdown anymore.
I think one of the things that undermines that communication is when parents are not upfront and honest and may say things that outside of the school building to other people that sometimes get back to staff members. And that really can damage that relationship that you're building with the people that are supporting your child and working with your child.
I think one of the most unfortunate things I've seen a parent do, which I don't think they really thought through when they did it, was posting on social media about meetings.
If somebody, it goes on Facebook and posts something about a conversation they had at school or with a particular staff member.
Especially within the community that I live in, it's a smaller community. Once you post it on there, everybody in town has seen it.
And that information gets back to staff members, and that really can be hurtful at times.
And it really sets up a tone before the meeting. So unfortunately, I've seen what they've written and what every community member has written in response to that, and it just makes it hard to have that meeting.
And it damages the relationship, and it's difficult to trust somebody when things like that are happening.
The thing that sometimes happens is parents will walk to the table and say, I've talked to my experts, and this is what they say we should be doing, and they're flabbergasted if the school district just doesn't say, oh, Thank you, I didn't realize the experts said that. So what they do in that process is not that we're not willing to listen to what their folks that they've had evaluate or that they've consulted with have to say, but you're discounting the expertise of the people sitting around the table as well, because educators are experts on children. Are we the only experts? No. Are we the most knowledgeable experts in the world? No. But we know a lot more specifically about your child over a longer period of time, most often than external consultants or evaluators do. So I think it's important to acknowledge everybody's expertise.
The people that are working with their child at school are trained professionals that have experience, and their role is really to support their child and help them be the most successful they can in a school setting.
Presume competence among the teachers and among the administrators. And to go into any meeting or situation expecting that they're going to do the right thing and that they're going to help your kid. That's why they're there.
They come in and saying, this is what I want, this is the only solution, this is the only way that we can serve the needs of my child.
And rather than listening to what the school district is saying, then voicing their opinions and collaborating together, they only want to hear what the staff, what they want to say about their child.
The person that they were forgetting to put on the table was the child. And once I got them to see that of, you're over here and you want a lot of things, but the law does not entitle us as parents to our wants. It entitles us to what does the child need.
The law never talks about every child with special education has to have the best education. And in fact, the law says that nowhere. What it says is you have to give a child what they need so they can learn.
We can begin on a positive note and with collaboration, we're definitely going to help this student progress. The worst thing we could do is come to an impasse where no one is communicating. And that means you're not going to have a solid or robust IEP, and you're not going to see the progress in your child that you would normally see if you had better collaboration.
Sometimes parents don't realize that they don't. I always say sometimes you win the battle and you lose the war. Like you can fight for something that's really not even appropriate for your child.
Pick your battles, but really know your rights and how the education system works.
It really behooves parents to become as educated as they can, both about special education in general and about special education within their district.
Start to understand what your parental legal rights are. How do you become your child's best advocate?
Ways that parents can learn about their rights in the special education process is going to trainings.
Strategies that parents can use to learn more about the special ed process is reaching out to their special education parent center. Every region in a state has a parent center. They can reach out to local support groups, the special task force, advocacy groups that have information and resources. Many times it's available online, many times you can call. A lot of it sometimes is printed out if you don't have access to a computer and can be sent to the schools.
I have found that it was incredibly helpful in my district when parents really joined with our SEPTA, our special education PTA, and the SEPTA was led by 2 women who were very, very knowledgeable about special education. And when parents kind of sought consult with them, they came into meetings much more prepared.
Sometimes we've had parents ask us to connect them with another parent in the district of a child with disability or somebody who's been through the process, and that seemed to have helped, having somebody you could talk to.
A strategy parents can use in a meeting so they understand what's happening is to ask questions.
For example, if a district says, well, we can't do that because it's against our policy, I'll ask, or I'll suggest that that parent ask, is that a district policy? And if so, could you show me where I could find that on your website? Or could you give me a hard copy of it before I leave today? Or could you email me a copy of that policy.
If there's something they don't understand or they're not clear on, ask. And if they can say, if they're not sure, can you give me an example of? How does that look? How would you do that? Or just, I don't understand this. Can you explain it again?
Some of the questions, some examples that I might suggest to a parent to think about asking might be, what has anyone else noticed my son Johnny's reading in class? Have they noticed if he struggles or not? Has anyone else noticed if my daughter Susie has trouble sitting still? Is it all day? You know, so the idea is, has anyone else seen this? And one of the great things about asking that question, the parent then is inviting the whole team to have a conversation about that topic or about your child. And, you know, there's a reason it's a committee. It's not 2 or 3 people. It's supposed to be a whole bunch of people that have an investment in this child one way or the other.
I believe active listening promotes good communication at meetings. And active listening means letting people say what they have to say and really listening. And then maybe repeating back, because often what people say is not what others hear. And when you have 2 different points of view, sometimes you really have to sit back and take it in and understand what the other person's trying to say.
Prior to a Committee for Special Education meeting, I think it's important for school districts to have pre-meetings so that they can discuss in a less formal setting at least the results of any testing that may have been conducted, or results of any progress monitoring that took place, so that there can be a conversation.
You know, a meeting shouldn't be a once and done kind of thing. It should be ongoing communication from the beginning, and that way there's no surprises at the meeting. So engaging the parents and even developing the IEP in advance. Most have draft IEPs now, so engaging the parents in that draft IEP process and not just reviewing with them once it's all done.
One of the things I find helps in meetings to make sure that we're collaborating with parents is I always have an agenda or an outline of what I want to discuss at the meeting.
What I've tried to do before is create a written agenda that kind of identifies each concern and who will speak to that. But up front, the parent knows that they can interject anywhere, but I just want them to know at the start of the meeting, here's the skeleton we're going to go through so that they can see we're going to hit everything.
It's important for schools to let families know that they're part of the meeting, and at any time they can ask questions, they can share their concerns, share information.
A lot of times I'll start my meetings off with, even CSE meetings, saying to the family, this really is a discussion. So if you have any questions, any point in the meeting, please feel free to share those with us.
For instance, in a CSE meeting, I always ask the parent to speak first, because I want them to give an opportunity from their perspective as to why are we at the table. And if you don't give a parent an opportunity to speak, then they're not going to feel like they're included in the decision making at all.
It's important to make sure that you acknowledge parents' questions, concerns, and fears, because they're there and they're real.
Things that schools can do to promote communication when it involves a bilingual family is reassuring them of their right to have an interpreter at their meetings. And the interpreter is there in the CSE, really guiding the interpreter in translating for the family, and also asking the interpreter to ask from the family if they're understanding what is happening at the meeting.
But we also have a large population of students that are not just Hispanic and African American. We also have a large influx of refugee students' families that are coming in. different cultures, sometimes different religions, and so just being mindful that customs and way people communicate are very different, and so we've had to do some adjustments in terms of planning for meetings, in terms of working with dates, being mindful of certain religious dates.
In some cultures, families tend to be more protective, more isolated if they have a child with a disability.
One thing that happened to me recently, it was a learning curve. I found out that women that practice Islam, it's not part of their custom to shake a man's hand that's not in their family, and so just those little things that you take as things we do every day requires us in the urban district to think more outside the box and be flexible in terms of our interactions.
Following up and having more intimate conversations with the family is just as important.
People come into a meeting, they're very upset about something that in their perception has occurred. People at the meeting may have a different perception of what has happened. And I think one of the really important things to do for people to kind of disarm that at a meeting is to, number one, to listen to what has happened and what they have to say. To number two, validate it, because whether it's your perception of what happened or not, it is their perception of what has happened. And then to apologize, because nobody wants a situation to start on the wrong foot. You say, I'm so sorry that happened to you, and how can we move on together?
What's helped us historically was presenting information. Why is the current setting not working? What's good about the current setting? What's not working about it? And then really tackling it from there, coming up with clear goals to measure, maybe in an interim basis, and try to capture a day in the life for the student, what it's like given the setting that they're in, and trying to promote the dialogue from there.
So if a parent is telling you what their concerns are, if you're seeing a profile of a child, you need to kind of think outside the box of how could we address those concerns? How can we help that child? Sort of, but within the overriding structure of special education. And I think sometimes what I've seen is that people become kind of too rigid and too concrete. This is the way it has to be. And it's like, no, there's a lot of flexibility in there, and children benefit from a great deal from that flexibility.
I had a particular parent that we had struggled with, and we had a pretty difficult meeting, which I will honestly tell you I didn't handle very well. So it was not all the parents' fault that it didn't go well. We both came in with sort of at loggerheads, and we left at loggerheads, and things didn't go very well at all. And there were a series of interactions that were pretty stressful, I'm sure, for the parent as well as for me. So I chose to take the meeting. In between meetings, I took it offline and just invited the parent in one-on-one. And I said, would you just come in and sit with me? And I sort of upfronted the issue and just said, look, I think you have this impression of me that I don't want to spend any money, and that I don't really want to serve the needs of your child, and I'm just throwing obstacles in your way every time that you want something. So I don't want to be that person. I'm not that person. I said, so how do we fix this? How do we, I need you to trust me, because we're not going to get anywhere if you don't trust me, and I need to trust you. So it's not working the way it is. What can we do about it? And to the parent's credit, she was quite honest with me and acknowledged that that's the way she felt. And we talked it through. And from there on, she was very supportive, and we had a much better relationship. So I think sometimes the CSE table can be a very artificial place to try to forge a relationship. You have to take it offline.
When the district and the parent are on opposite pages, but we've made a decision at the table, I try to leave the door open to come back in a couple of weeks so that the parent knows, okay, this is what we're going to try, but that door is still back open to come back in 3 or 4 weeks to look at how we're doing.
In order to de-escalate a conflict, it's really important to sit back and listen and really let parents express what their concern is, and to really shift the focus to the student. What is it that the student is struggling with? What is the sort of neurocognitive and neurodevelopmental profile of that student? What are their strengths and weaknesses? How can we work with that? How can we so I think if we kind of take the emphasis away from the conflict between parent and staff and kind of shift it to the student.
If everybody focuses on what the needs are, then those needs generate potential solutions which can be thrown on the table, and people can parse out what might be the advantages and disadvantages of each. It's open communication and open-mindedness to creative thinking that I think finds the most powerful solutions.
Parents are always in grief, in different stages, dealing, and it's a sensitive area, and when you're talking about their child that has a disability.
Parents of students with disabilities are under tremendous pressure every day. They're under pressure to make sure that they're doing well in school, that they're doing well at home, that their doctors are being seen, that the people are coming in and out of their home. They're getting advice from strangers, and many times much younger strangers, telling them what's right for their child. And that's very difficult for a parent. A parent feels, what is the future of my child? It's an unknown. And so they need to feel that they have control over that.
The schools can understand that sometimes parents are coming in exhausted, and so emotions can get high because you're tired. They've been to several medical appointments and school meetings and financial strains and all these things that come sometimes with having a child with a disability. And yet when you get to the meeting, it's all about this, just kind of like a process or a procedural kind of thing without really taking into consideration the whole family.
Understand that these parents are really trying to do what's right for their child, and they might need a little bit of support and coaxing to open up, but if they feel the district is working with them, that's going to make it so much better for the parent. Parents who have a supportive school district do really well emotionally, and when a parent's doing well emotionally, the child tends to do better also.
Administrators may have to tell families once, twice, 3 times the same information in different ways before it can really sink in so that we can all help our kid.
Sometimes many of our parents have had challenges along the way where systems or schools have not been responsive, so you may just be the team that's inherited some bad history, and you got to work on building that rapport and relationship.
We as administrators and as school personnel sometimes get so caught up in the system and what we're trying to do to serve the needs of many, many, many children, many diverse needs of many children, that we forget that the parent comes into the room with only one person on their mind, and that's their own child, and that they're incredibly emotionally involved with their children, as are any of us who are parents. That it's different when you come to the table talking about your child, and when you think your child has been wounded or is not getting what he or she needs, it's painful. It goes right through you. It goes right to your heart. And yeah, you might get angry. You might even get obnoxious at times. But every parent has that capability within them when their child is in their mind being threatened in some way. We all have a mama bear or a papa bear in us. So you have to keep that perspective in and really say they're advocating for their child and they should be applauded for that. And maybe the conversation isn't over until we figure out how to support your child.
If I had a magic wand, I'd want parents to know that we really do care about their kid. And that people that I know in special education went into special education because they really cared about kids and sticking up for kids and advocating for kids.
We really are all gathered at the table for the same reason. And again, that may not have always been their experience coming into a school, but when they come in, we're all there about their child and really looking at how do we put the pieces in place to make their school experience the best that it can be for them.
98% of the people they're going to run into from the school, from teaching, care about their child and have the same goal as them, that they want their child to learn. And they want them to learn in spite of their disability or because of their disability. But they have the same goal.
Sometimes as the CSE administrator, you know all the players at the table. We would have staff who were on the spectrum, who did great with kids, but really panicked talking with adults and may not deliver that information, in the most parent-friendly way.
Many of us who entered this field have entered it because we also are parents of children with special needs. We have, some of us do have experience looking at it from many different viewpoints, and for them not to be afraid to openly discuss their concerns with us.
I think school administrators need to know that special ed is one of the toughest areas, I think, for anybody to coordinate or be involved in. And I can speak from that because I used to wear that hat. I also think we have to remember, as school administrators, that all kids have bad days, and not to think of, not to weight a bad day of a kid with an IEP any differently than you would a general ed kid. And remember that they're all of our kids.
I think one of the most important thing for administrators who are not in the special ed role in a district is to get to know the kids that are students with disabilities. The principal didn't know this student well, so the student had made some statements that could have been interpreted in a really negative way. But knowing this child, my first response was how great that he communicated with you and he didn't shut down. So the principal took time and spent almost an hour with a student just talking with him and getting to know him. And then afterwards communicated to me, you know what, I'm glad I did that because I don't think that the way people were interpreting what he said really is what he meant.
When you have a student who does have a history of some behavioral difficulties in school, that the principal is informed about the student's FBA, behavior plan. Is there something in the child's history or in their IEP that gives more information about the behavioral needs of the child?
What you would look at as a problem with one child is not necessarily a problem with a child with a disability.
And that everybody who has some interaction with that student is aware of the appropriate consequences to be used with a child, the appropriate way to interact with that child if they're escalated. So I think there's a lot that goes into dealing with students with some behavioral needs.
It's really important that school administrators collaborate with the special education staff. It's really imperative that they understand the notion of behavior being a manifestation of a disability.
And then bottom line, it's about really, again, bringing the conversation back to the student and what's best for the student. And developing that collaborative relationship is imperative, because if you have a collaborative relationship, when anything comes up, people get on the phone, they give you a phone call, they ask for opinions, you bring it to the table and you're honest and you figure it out.
And try to help them to understand it so that they are interpreting it through the lens of the child's disability, not through their general education lens.
I think it's also good for non-special ed administrators to really understand that IEPs and 504s are not just a good idea, but if it's in the 504 or the IEP, that the school and the district has an obligation to fulfill what's in there. If we're not, it puts the district in a pretty precarious situation in terms of compliance, and then ultimately it also puts the student in a situation where they're not receiving the program that has been designed specifically for them.
Some advocates can work one-on-one with parents just to go through the evaluations in the IEP, and if they're needed at the meeting, that can happen, but prior to that, they can just work with them to understand that process, so then when they do go to the school, they have more confidence.
I really want everyone to know that an advocate's job is to help a parent work collaboratively with their school district. We're there to support that parent in many ways, but one of them is so that they understand the process and they understand what's going on in a meeting. We should not go in as advocates adversarial. We need to go in with a positive attitude. We need to make an example for how we want the parent to act in a meeting. And I want school districts to know that that's what an advocate does. We're really there to make this work. We're there to get that child an appropriate IEP.
My personal perspective is that I see some advocates kind of want to go steamrolling in and say it's going to be their way, and they really don't talk to the parent, and they don't open up dialogue with the CSE to really talk to them and have a conversation as to what's going on. There is always two sides to every story, so you have to hear from both sides and then figure out what piece is broken and how do we fix it. Because if we don't have communication and collaboration, it's never going to work.
I think that it's really important that people, school administrators, teachers, parents, presume competence of students. I think that we miss a lot when we make assumptions about our own children, someone else's child. And I think it's just imperative that we presume competence, and that as school administrators, really, it's our job to program for that competence and give kids access to curriculum and give them the most successful experience they can have in school.